Welcome back to my top 30 favorite movies of the 2010s. If you haven't seen part 1, check the link in the description. So last time, before we got to the list, we looked at my honorable mentions from 2010 to 2013. This time, we'll be looking at my honorable mentions from 2014 to 2016. Starting with Birdman and/or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. I'll give further thoughts when I do all the Best Picture winners, but this is one of the most ambitious and well-directed movies I've ever seen. Captain America: The Winter Soldier, a great spy action film with Steve Rogers still being my favorite of the Avengers. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Fuck the haters, this is very entertaining, engaging film with the best superhero movie romance of all time. Boyhood. Take away the amazing fact that it was shot over the course of a decade, this gave me such a nostalgia blast, it's unbelievable. The Lego Movie, an extremely funny, well-paced, and kind of deep film about the power of imagination. The Martian, suspenseful, thrilling, funny, with some of the best special effects I've ever seen. Avengers: Age of Ultron. Yes, it's the weakest of the Avengers movies, but damn, it's still a ton of fun with great characters. The Hunger Games: Mockingjays Parts 1 and 2. Yeah, I really like these movies. They were good adaptations and had a lot of heart and seemed very timely in today's political climate. Deadpool, one of the funniest comic book movies I've ever seen, and Ryan Reynolds deserved a freaking Oscar for it. Arrival, atmospheric build-up, a great performance from Amy Adams, and a smart sci-fi at its absolute best. And La La Land. Fun music, two likable leads, and an emotionally packed story that hits all the right notes. And that's it for honorable mentions, although believe me, I had to make some pretty painful cuts, but we don't have time to get into any more, so let's just get back to the list.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of a team. Everything is awesome.
Number 20.
I need to use your phone then to call my family and tell them that I'm safe here and make sure they're okay.
Michelle, they're not okay.
When it comes to horror films and thrillers, I consider it a great one if I try to make time to watch it every year for Halloween. There are other classics like Halloween and The Blair Witch Project, and some more recent stuff like Don't Breathe, Paranormal Activity movies, A Quiet Place, and the one that surprised me the most, 10 Cloverfield Lane. Really think about how much was going against this. It's a sort of sequel to a found footage movie that isn't found footage. Those have pretty much never worked. It was originally a completely unrelated script that they just slapped the name of a popular movie on, and it's a slow, atmospheric film with only 3 characters, which gives it a strong chance of being boring. But this is one of the most intense, thrilling, and scariest movies I've seen of the 2010s. The slow, building tension had me on the edge of my seat the entire time, and the fact that we spend most of the movie not knowing if something actually is going on outside, or if Howard is just crazy and a kidnapper, gives it an extra level of suspense. Howard is one of the best antagonists of the past 5 years. He's creepy, but he does kind of have this fatherly vibe to him. You're not sure if you can trust him or not. I love Michelle, and the arc she goes through is satisfying, and Emmett is funny while not being annoying and also being helpful. All 3 are portrayed well by John Goodman, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and John Gallagher Jr. I wouldn't mind seeing them in a more family-centered sitcom setting. There's plenty of twists, it's got an emotional pull that makes me feel for several characters, and while some people were mixed on the ending, I personally loved it. It made sense given everything we'd seen before, it was thrilling, and it did seem to give a connection to the Cloverfield universe. I love the first Cloverfield, and I've wanted a sequel for years, and I like the way they were doing it with this in Cloverfield Paradox. Too bad you all bitched about it and we'll probably never get another one. Even taken by itself, if it had just been called The Cellar, this movie would still be one of the best thrillers I've seen.
I didn't know that I was loved until I tasted you. I was so much younger yesterday. Everything is better when we stay together.
Number 19. This series has spanned 3 decades, and its 3 best movies were all released in the 2010s. Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation are both great movies. Mission Impossible Fallout was one of the best action movies ever made. Every action scene in this movie is so damn good that I would probably rank them in a list, and it would be the hardest list I've ever made. And there is so much variety, from a skydive all done in one take, to a chase scene through Britain that incorporates cars, motorcycles, and foot chases, to a fight in a bathroom between Tom Cruise, Henry Cavill, and a martial arts expert. I cannot get over how good the action scenes are. I thought I was gonna have a heart attack. That is how suspenseful and well directed they are. I was exhausted by the end of it, but it does manage to have enough breaks between the action to give you a breather and give some character development. I love these characters. While we sadly lost Jeremy Renner, we still have Simon Pegg as Benji, who is hilarious, and Ving Rhames is a badass Luther. Rebecca Ferguson is also awesome, and Cruise just is Ethan Hunt. This motherfucker will hang from a helicopter for you people just to entertain you, and you still don't treat him as a god? I also liked Henry Cavill's character, although there is a twist with him that not only was pretty obvious, but was one of my small gripes with the movie. It's really well written, there's plenty of twists, the villain is intimidating, the music is fantastic, and it looks great. As an action movie, this is about as close to perfect as you can get. I honestly don't know how you can top it, but you know what? I'd love to see them try. Mission Impossible Fallout is an action masterpiece. Number 18. I just talked about this in my favorite movies of 2019 videos, so this will probably be very brief.
I'm serious, man! I will break your head! If I were you...
Us manages to be a very scary horror film with a lot of humor and drama, and it never feels tonally inconsistent. The humor fits with these characters, like, okay, these characters in this situation would make a remark like that. And the drama feels real because I like this family. The sort of dorky dad who wants to protect his family, the paranoid mom, and the kids who fight and bicker, but manage to be smart in situations where they need to be. All this enhances the horror. My legs were shaking at several parts of this movie, and I was always wondering where it was going. Who are these people? Why do they want them dead? How far does this thing go? All of the performances are excellent, including an Oscar-worthy performance by Lupita Nyong'o. The music is great, it never gets boring, and it looks fantastic. And yeah, like I said, I just talked about this a couple weeks ago, and I don't want to basically go on about the same stuff. I hope whatever Jordan Peele gives us next will be even better. And that's all I got. Next number.
She's sweet but a psycho, a little bit psycho. At night she's screaming, my mind. Everything is better when we stick together.
Number 17. Steven Spielberg, my favorite director, made a lot of movies this decade, from Oscar movies to just pure popcorn entertainment, and I liked pretty much all of them. But when I have to pick a favorite, there's really no contest.
There. I believe I have captured something of your likeness.
Not bad. What do you think, Snowy? Snowy.
I've never read any of the 2010 comic books, or Tauntaun if you're from Belgium, so I can only judge this based on how it works as a movie. As a movie, this has been compared to Indiana Jones. But if I'm being honest, I like this more than all the Indiana Jones movies, and I adore Last Crusade. It's a great adventure movie that also kind of doubles as a buddy movie. I love Tintin and Haddock together, Thompson and Thompson get some great laughs, Daniel Craig as the villain is pretty intimidating, and Snowy is just so freaking adorable. This also has a place in animation history as the last film, at least mainstream one, that used motion capture. I think motion capture can be used well in movies. This is a gorgeous looking film. It never goes into uncanny valley with the characters, the textures and details still look amazing over 8 years later. The action scenes are some of the best Spielberg has ever done. I'm still blown away by that chase scene through Morocco. The editing is great too, especially the part where Haddock is telling the story of the unicorn. The music is great and it's just a fun adventure that manages to keep the tension high while allowing for some slower moments. I'm not sure if kids would love this. When it tries to go strictly for kids is when it's at its weakest, but I think a lot of them would still enjoy it. There's a sort of childlike feel to it, like a kid could have written it, but then an adult just came along to polish it up a bit. I love this movie. It's the best movie Nickelodeon has ever done and one of Spielberg's crowning achievements. So when the hell are we getting a sequel? Number 16. Why? Why did this movie get such a massive backlash? I spent years saying that while Christopher Nolan is a great director, his movies, with the exception of Memento, aren't holy shit good to me. I thought The Dark Knight was a great movie, but only got to greatness because of Heath Ledger's performance. Take that out, it's a very ambitious movie with a lot of contrivances and stuff that doesn't make sense if you think about it. But then this film comes out, I love it, and I'm finally willing to join the Nolan cult, and you all turn on him? You motherfuckers just hate me, don't you? Yes, I love The Dark Knight Rises. It's my favorite in the Nolan trilogy, and every single complaint I've heard about it either is explained in the movie or is no worse than the other two. But you know what? I'm gonna cover this again next year when I do all the films by the directors I've done retrospectives on that came out after I reviewed them. But when I do that, I'll cover everyone's complaints. I think now I'll just explain why I love this movie more than the other two. Well, to put it bluntly, because it had emotion. The other two movies were a lot of really great ideas and the villains were given a lot of great motivation, but really, I just didn't feel much of an emotional connection. A major character dies in The Dark Knight and I felt nothing. In this movie, I love the stuff between Alfred and Bruce. There's a scene at the end that made me come close to crying. I love John Blake and how he tries to be the best cop he can. I love the personal struggles Bruce has to go through after the events of the last film. Bane is a great villain. He's one of those you can understand his motivation, but shows that going too far into an ideology is not a good thing, which is something I wish more people had listened to. The acting is great, Christian Bale gives a lot of personality to Bruce, and I never minded the voice. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is great as always, and Tom Hardy as Bane is intimidating, but also a little funny at times. The action scenes are some of the best that Nolan has ever done. The beginning with the plane is one of the best action scenes of the decade, and the spectacle of it all. Seeing this in theaters was a visual marvel, and it doesn't feel that long. It's over 2.5 hours, and it goes by super quick. I love this movie. Was it perfect? Fuck no. But I will defend it to my dying day.
All these fairy tales are full of shit. One more fucking love song, I'll be sick. Now I'm at a payphone. Everything is better when we stay together.
Number 15. Oh hey Nolan, back so soon?
Brand Doyle, back to the Ranger now.
We're not leaving without her data.
Get back here now. No, we do not have time.
I love Dark Knight Rises, Inception, and Dunkirk, but in my opinion, Interstellar is the best movie Christopher Nolan has done, not just in the 2010s, but since Memento. It's a film that earns its runtime of 2.5 hours, and when I first saw it, I was blown away. But not for the reasons you would expect. I mean, the story is interesting, actually way more interesting than I expected to be, but my main reason for loving this movie is that I was actually interested in the characters. I love Joseph and the relationship he has with his kids. Matthew McConaughey gives the best performance I have ever seen from him, and I've seen Dallas Buyers Club. I got so invested in these three that I was scared every second they were on this planet where minutes for them is years off the planet. I loved Anne Hathaway's character Amelia, I love the little robot he has, I love when Matt Damon comes in the picture, and the movie's over 5 years old, I don't care about spoilers anymore. I love all the little science things that, while dramatized, do seem plausible. The effects and cinematography are absolutely stunning, some of the best I have ever seen, and I absolutely adore the ending. This movie made me cry. I never thought Nolan would ever be able to make me cry. He actually got me to care so much about Joseph and Murph that I was crying. I love this movie, and while Memento is still my favorite Nolan film, this is certainly his most ambitious. Even if you don't care for it, there's so much love and passion put into it. It's one of the best science fiction films of the 21st century, and I guarantee that 30 years from now, people will be talking about it in the same vein as 2001: A Space Odyssey and Blade Runner. Except this movie isn't boring. Oh yeah, come at me, film nerds.
That's just how I feel. Trying to reach the place that I can't see. Everything is better when we stay together.
Number 14. This is another one I just reviewed last month, so once again it'll probably be very short. Super 8 is one of the last times I can remember actually hyping myself up for a movie, to the point where I was checking the website every damn day, because it's just so hard to get that excited anymore given how toxic Twitter is. It seemed to encompass so many things I loved: kids adventure, amateur filmmaking, alien story, believable drama, all in that late 70s, early 80s aesthetic, and it lived up to my expectations. Even years later, I still really love it. Sure, Stranger Things would come along 5 years later, and technically they would have fleshed out more of the characters and give more of an in-depth mystery, but I still think Super 8 holds a special place and is really underrated. The acting from the child actors is so good, and the characters they play are interesting and likable. I love Joe and feel bad for him that his mother passed away. I love Alice as she tries to be more independent. All the other boys are funny and oddly charming. The mystery is thrilling and suspenseful because we don't get a good look at the monster, so we have to rely a lot on sound effects and clever camera shots. I'm serious when I say the only thing holding this movie back is the last 7 minutes, which get really cheesy and kinda seems like they didn't know how to end it. But that doesn't stop this from being a great movie that actually met my high expectations and for some reason isn't brought up anymore. If you haven't seen it or don't remember much about it, give it a watch. It's got something for everybody and should go down as one of the best Spielberg homages of all time.
It's alright, alright, tonight, tonight. It's alright, alright, tonight, tonight. Everything is better when we stick together. Side by side.
Number 13.
Janet, are you feeling all right?
Stop calling me Janet.
Isn't that your name?
Janet's asleep.
And I'm talking.
The Conjuring is a great horror movie. The Conjuring 2 is one of the best horror films I have ever seen. Every scene in this movie should be shown in film classes on how to make a horror film, how to build suspense, how to move the camera, where exactly to cut. The direction, editing, and production design are so good. It knows exactly how much to build up a scare, when to use loud noises, and when to cut. I like editing. Obviously, it's what I do for a living, and in my opinion, this deserves to be shown in film classes right alongside Run Lola Run and Baby Driver on how to do editing correctly. A lot of crappy horror movies will just have boring walking with an occasional paranormal thing happen for the first 2/3 and then go batshit insane in the last act. This doesn't. It gradually builds to its insane climax. If they didn't, it would have been dumb, but because it gets bigger and bigger as it goes, it works. And it looks amazing. I firmly believe that James Wan has a time machine and sent the cast and crew back to the 70s. It just looks that much like that era, and the effects are great, relying on a lot of in-camera stuff. You know the Crooked Man? That wasn't CG, that was an actual actor with Marfan syndrome. So it's scary and is directed great, but I think what really makes this special is the family. I love horror films centered around a family that feels real, and I love the Hodgkins. While all this is going on, there's bullying at school and the single mother who is trying to raise all these kids on a crappy job. Ed and Lorraine Warren have great chemistry, and the scenes between them and the kids are really sweet. The part where Ed plays guitar for them is a legit cute scene, and I fucking hated that Gregory woman. Was all this fake? I don't care. It still leads to one of the best horror movies of all time, and I really hope the third movie is just as good, if not better, when it comes out later this year.
Used to dream of outer space, but now they're laughing at the face, saying, wake up, you need to make money. Yeah.
Everything is better when we stick together. Side by side.
Number 12. 2014 was a little weird, because in my opinion, it's probably the third best movie year of the decade. Just great movies released that year, but my favorite of the year is this, and it's only number 12.
This is where you've been for 20 years? You've been rescuing them.
I really love the first How to Train Your Dragon. It somehow managed to take several cliches I hate and make a movie I loved, with funny characters and interesting story tied together with a really believable friendship between Hiccup and Toothless. How to Train Your Dragon 2 not only takes everything that made the first movie work and improves them, but fixes all the flaws that weren't enough to ruin the first film but does age it a bit. The first movie had great animation for the time. This movie is one of the most beautiful animated films I've ever seen. There are certain shots that if you were to take a screenshot, you may think is a real photograph for a second. The first movie had a very cliche story about a father being ashamed of his son and the son trying to prove himself, but he becomes friends with the enemy. Again, they did it well, but the story in this feels so much more fresh and different. And it expands on the world. We see all these amazing locations and a bunch of creative dragon designs. The flying scenes are amazing. I miss seeing it in theaters and I really wish I could have. And they lead to some suspenseful action scenes. The villain is horrifying. I was always scared what he would do next. I love the stuff with Hiccup and his mom. It's really touching, them getting to know each other after he thought she was dead for years. It's really funny, and while the supporting characters aren't my favorite part, they do have some good comedic timing and aren't as annoying as they could have been. The music is phenomenal. Toothless is the most adorable creature ever put in an animated film. He's basically a bat-cat hybrid, designed by the same guy who designed Stitch, and has a lot of emotion. I did not think going into this that I would be close to tears. It does something I wasn't expecting, and that's what I love about all three of these movies. They take risks. So many movies made for kids don't like to acknowledge that death, injury, and just moving away are things that happen, so when they actually do acknowledge it, I really appreciate it. I'm not joking when I say this deserves to be regarded as one of the best sequels of all time. It's one of the best animated movies I have ever seen, and I'm glad that kids will grow up watching it and showing it to their kids for years to come.
Yeah, the drums they swing low, and the trumpets they go.
Everything is better when we stick together. Side by side.
Number 11.
Forever.
Some adaptations are better than their book counterparts. Some absolutely decimate them. Last year I decided to reread all the Hunger Games books, given that I hadn't since 2012. The first and third books held up really well, but the second was somehow even more boring than I remember. It took me months to finish because I just didn't care. It's not bad, but it's repetitive, focused on some boring love drama, and even when we get into the games, they're kind of confusingly written. So I'm willing to call this one of the best book-to-film adaptations I've ever seen because it does every single aspect better. The chemistry between the actors makes the romance more interesting, the jabs at media manipulation are a lot more prevalent, and they take out a lot of the pointless shit like those two girls who were heading to District 13 and then were never seen again. This actually shows the strengths of show don't tell. Whereas the book is a lot of Katniss telling us things are happening, here we're able to see the revolution start. But enough of comparing it to the book, this is also one of the best sequels I've ever seen. While I really like the first film, the complaint everyone gave it is that there's too much shaky cam. But here, the action scenes are spectacular. They're exciting, they're creative. When we get into the arena, I was in fear of what would happen, and again, I've read the book. It builds on the story and world of the first film. It was fascinating and also kind of scary how good Snow is in manipulation and threats. And then of course there's Jennifer Lawrence giving one of the best performances of her career. You can see the pain in her face when she has to go on tour and basically read from cue cards to try and keep people from revolting. Katniss is a great character and I like all the others, who didn't leave much of an impression on me in the book, but are interesting here and sometimes funny. Production design is fantastic. I still love how over the top the fashion is in the Capitol, and the special effects are great. And it all ends with one of the best final shots I have ever seen to a movie. That was so good, I was sad I had to wait another year for the next one. Look, the book isn't bad, it has its moments, but whenever the topic comes up on films that are better than the book, this should go right up there with Jaws and Forrest Gump. But anyway, that ends part 2. Join me next week for the top 10. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.
'Cause we got the fire, fire, fire. Yeah, we got the fire, fire.